Let's begin our process of taking a look at the magnetic monopole. I think one of the most difficult things to grasp is that life really is an illusion. It's difficult to grasp. I look at the television coverage of the trauma in the Gulf states in America, and you look at the suffering of human beings and how easy it is to say that suffering is an illusion and so forth and so on, and you look at all of this and you see that life can be such an ordeal, and so much of the ordeal of any catastrophe is the burden that's placed on the poor and the most disenfranchised in any society. And we have an enormous problem with our ability to be able to manage the material domain. As much as it seems like we're masters of it, we truly are not. And one of the essential teachings of human design is that in order to be able to survive in this illusion, that you have to be able to honor the way in which the illusion works. I've always stressed the fact that human design is the mechanics of the Maya. This is an absolute of the Maya, but it's of the Maya. I think that's an oxymoron, but anyway, this is all about how we function in the illusion. And yet for me, it's clear to me, and I understand it. That is, I see it for what it is. I see, in this illustration that you're looking at, in the upper right-hand corner is the logo of Jovian, and it's this very old, it's about 300-year-old Dutch woodcut of a man sticking his head through the sky. It's this great mystical picture. And it's wonderful to stick your head through the sky, it really is. But if you look at that picture, that guy's down on his knees with his butt sticking out, and somebody's bound to kick it. You just can't stay there. There's no point, because in fact there's nothing going on over there. It's just the underlying mechanics that's behind the illusion. And once you understand that, and once you see what the rules are, because there are rules. I mean, it's the joke about living in the Maya. The Maya is nothing but rules, because the Maya is deeply well organized. It's really well organized. I mean, it's so well organized that it includes chaos, and you can't imagine anything more organized than that. But what actually makes it work? Because I'm not just somebody who was, given some kind of abstract message. I was given a fundamentally logical construct about the nature of being, how things really work. And the longer that I have time to ponder the beauty of all of this, the more fascinated I am with this single thing, this very odd thing, this magnetic monopole. It's not a term, by the way, that I coined, or a term that came out of the ether in terms of the voice. It already existed as a term. It's already something that has been postulated by science. They've never actually been able to substantiate it or find it. They honestly don't know where to look. They spent tens of millions of dollars in the 80s doing monopole research out in space. Within the context of human design, there is nothing that carries as much power and influence in what it is to be than the monopole, because it's literally the monopole that is holding this illusion together. If you look at this illustration, by the way, when I put up a new illustration, I've just put up an illustration. If anybody doesn't see it, tell me, because that way I can refresh the page for you, and then I'll make sure that you see it. if you look at the illustration, what you're looking at is my original construct for the graphic when I first began to do graphic analysis. And the very first graphic analysis that I did, because this is the way that it was laid out to me by the voice. And it was only later when I began to introduce human design practically that it was really efficient simply to get rid of the wheels on either side and to put down this string of numbers and planets the way you look at your rave chart today. But the original rave chart is basically what you're looking at. And there's something very profound about it. Because for me it really is the essence of understanding illusion. This year I begin what is for me the most intense educational process that I've ever been involved in, and that is the programs that are going to begin not next week, the week after next. And all of those programs have something in common, particularly PHS and rave psychology, is that they deal with the left wheel or the right wheel, the design wheel or the personality wheel, separately. In other words, they deal exclusively with the byproduct of those particular crystals of consciousness. And one has to grasp something, that crystals of consciousness, one being personality and one being design, that the way in which consciousness operates is very, very different. I mean, I think some of you saw that in the notice board on the opening wallpaper, there was the announcement for my Sunday lecture series in 2 weeks. And it's called Magic Design and the Inanimate. And it is about understanding that all of the inanimate is endowed with design consciousness. You know, it's not just simply our body that has a design consciousness. The whole inanimate realm has a design consciousness that operates exclusively out of the way in which the design crystal works. Now remember, if you don't have a personality crystal as a companion, it's a very different process. You know, when you're looking, for example, at the inanimate, you're only looking at a world that operates through design consciousness. So for me, when you go below the line, you know, you enter into the basic binary. It is a fundamental binary. Do not forget something about these two wheels. They're calculated 88 degrees of the sun apart. I mean, you know, they have very little to do with each other. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, it's like, you know, it's like the magic of what happens when you take the two wheels and you superimpose them on top of each other. You know, and all of a sudden this cross emerges. Right? But you know, the moment that you separate them back, they're very different. They're very different. It's why, for example, the Sphinx was something that was a mystery, what was hidden until we had a two-wheel calculating system, because only then could it emerge. They're very, very different from each other. Very different from each other. And of course, the whole thing for us as beings is that we do not have any real connection to them as separate forces. Not really. Because we're always operating within the context of the quantum. It's the quantum. You know, that's what we are. We're not this or that. I mean, this or that or there, they're aspects in a calculation. You know, but when you want to look, that's why it was easy to take away the wheels and replace them with numbers and symbols, because what we are is what happens in that body graph in the center. I mean, that's what we are. You know, the aspects are not us. I mean, that's one of the greatest jokes of understanding why the mind is incapable of being your authority. You know, your personality operating as the passenger, it doesn't operate as an us. You know? It has no real connection to that whole, to that illusion of whole. And what holds it together? I mean, this is the magic. You see, there's a force. There's a force in the totality, in what I call the biverse. There's a force that binds things together. And it is this very binding that holds the entire illusion of existence together. It's incredible. It's the monopole. I mean, it's the monopole. The magnetic monopole. You know, it's not a binary pole like magnets normally are. It is a monopole. And what it does is that it attracts. Now I want you to think about the consequences of the monopole, because we're going to take a step backward. Right? I'm going to change the illustration. And let's see. Okay. And what you should be seeing is what are known as the Band 2 plates. As a matter of fact, those plates have been available as a free download from the Human Design Update now for 3 or 4 months. It's quite a long series. And it was an attempt of mine many years ago. Obviously, I received a great deal of information. And in order to be a witness of my own experience, I've always needed some kind of creative impetus. And I started to do illustrations many years ago. The actual illustrations of this were done in a very, very old computer, very antiquated graphic program. But it was an opportunity for me to put down the cosmology as it had been given to me on the first night of my experience. And so the mechanics of the gods is part of the Band 2 sequence. But I bring this up for the beginnings and to really understand the beginnings. If we go back, if we look at the nature of being, the first thing to understand about the nature of being is the relationship between the magnetic monopole and the design crystal. I mean, think about all of the design crystals that are out of manifestation. All of those design crystals in a giant design crystal bundle that is within the mantle of the earth, deep within the earth. And if you think about all of those design crystals that are waiting there, and it's one of my favorite images. I try to express the unbelievable density of the life field. I mean, imagine now that you simply stretch your arm out horizontally from your body. And as you stretch your arm out horizontally from your body, imagine for a moment that what is happening to you is that there is all these cells on the surface of your skin that are dying. And they're dying by the tens of thousands every minute. And each and every one of those cells, if you know the design of a single cell, you know that a single cell has a design crystal. And every single one of those cells, as they die, the design crystal goes down and another one comes up to exactly replace it. Now imagine all the outstretched arms and all the cells dying on the surface of all of the life forms on the planet. Think about the movement that is taking place that is beyond our capacity to see. Remember something about the nature of the Maya, is that the Maya allows you only to see certain things. I mean, that's what the Maya is good at. The classic Potemkin village, I mean, the Maya is just a superficial gloss. That's all it is. There is this incredible stuff going on, let alone the 3 trillion neutrinos a second that go through every square inch all over the planet all the time. I mean, it's unbelievable what kind of a consciousness field this is. But think about every single one of those design crystals. How do they know where they're going? They all have embedded in them a magnetic monopole. Every single one of them. I mean, that's how design crystals come into existence. They come into existence with a form and mold, and in that design crystal is embedded the magnetic monopole, and that's where it was at the beginning when the yang and the yin banged into each other. When the personality crystal banged into the design crystal, what it released was the monopole. And by the way, this is one of my lectures about love. Look at this plate that's up. The phases of cosmic evolution from the rave scale are initiated in violent acts. The bundle, this is a crystal bundle, design crystal bundle, guided by the monopole, one with the design, in a movement towards the possibility of expressing love, eventually reaching its initiating place. Now, the moment that the monopole is broken away, this is the prime magnetic monopole from the prime design crystal, the moment of this great shattering, This is the moment that the whole process of love begins. But it has nothing to do with love as we understand it. It's one of my oldest jokes about the magnetic monopole is that to fulfill its need to be reunited with the design crystal, we have to die. Think about that. If you look into the Rave Book of the Dead, you will see that, at the moment of physical death, that the design crystal comes down from the Ajna center, goes into the G center, is reconnected with the magnetic monopole, and the magnetic monopole guides it back down out of the body, down into the earth, back into the bundle. This is all monopole business. All of it. You see, the whole thing is monopole business. And to understand that the monopole is something that has its source, in that sense, in the design crystal, is to understand the basic form principle of all of totality. It is simply pure form principle. The illustration that you're looking at is just a kind of aura drawing, if you will. This aura radiating out of the center of the G center. Now think about the G center. Everything that we understand about the G center, everything that we understand about identity, the self, this is all the monopole. There is no self without the monopole. Absolutely none. It's the most extraordinary thing to think about. When we look at the G center, we talk about a number of things, and we talk about love and direction. And in the very earliest lectures that I did in human design, when I first began introducing human design, I used to talk about my description of the magnetic monopole was like the arms that go up from the top of a streetcar that hooks the streetcar into its specific geometry. And of course, this is truly the nature of the way in which the monopole operates at that one level. In other words, not only is it holding us together, this monopole, in the illusion of our separateness. And again, what it's doing is it's holding together the design and the personality who can't stand each other. You really got to think about that. We all know that. The longer you are in human design, the deeper you should get to the point of recognizing that your personality and your design have problems with each other. This is my joke about if you're looking for, a cosmic love affair, boy, you better find it within yourself. It's when the personality can embrace the design as its sacred marriage, then you're really getting somewhere. But they're very different. The not-self passenger has no use for the fact that the design is not like it. It would love it to be like it, and it's not. So when you go into that center, into that G center, it's one of the jokes I find about, no, it's not a joke, it's just the way things get misunderstood over time. The undefined G center. I've talked a lot about it over the years. The whole thing about looking for the right place and a not-self strategy of always looking for love, and this idea that if you have an open G center, you don't have a fixed identity. But that's not the same as saying you don't have a fixed self, because it has nothing to do with self. It has to do with the identity of self. We have 4 of the roll gates of identity in the G center. If you've got an undefined G center, you've got an indeterminate, non-fixed identity. But yourself, that self exists. It is what is being held together in the illusion of your totality by the monopole. At the very core of understanding what the G center is, it is, in that sense, the gravitational center of your being. It's pulling it all together. And it is a consistent self in that sense. It simply doesn't have a consistent identity to go along with it. But something else to consider. It's one of those funny statistics. There was a hospice in the San Francisco area. And I don't know how it came about, but they began to do research on on weighing the dead, and they had all of these hospital beds that were fixed with with being able to weigh them, and they began to discover something really incredible, that when somebody dies, that there is a destabilization in their mass. In other words, they seem at the moment of death to suddenly weigh less. And of course, a lot of people assume that this has to do with, the soul or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of speculation about that. But one of the things that's very clear to me about the nature of the magnetic monopole is that one of its great mysteries, and one of the things to truly understand about it, is that it is responsible for what in the illusion we call our relative mass. Think about this. Really think about this. In other words, the density of your mass. It's an illusion, after all. I mean, it truly is. If we put an electron microscope to your skin, eventually we can see all the way to the other side and see the other side. I mean, it's porous. It is just, it's just an illusion. The monopole is determining not only what is your relative mass, but that relative mass is something that doesn't have a rigid border to it, what we call the aura. In other words, the furthest extent of your aura is the power of your monopole to hold your illusion together. And one of the most interesting things to recognize about the nature of self is that the nature of self begins at the edge of the aura. I mean, that's where your self begins. That's where the self that is you is contacted. And again, that's the illusion. It's the quantum result of these forces being yanked together, held together by force by the monopole. And it's true. It's true. And one of the most interesting things about the nature of the monopole is to understand the monopole's own mechanics, that this business, this illusion that we call life, that for the monopole, if we could anthropomorphize it, we cannot be aware of that, but if we could, there is a suffering in it, in the sense that, it's only going to feel good when it gets back together again with the design. Only when it reconnects to the design crystal, which unfortunately for humans is a matter of death, only then is the monopole going to fulfill its process. You see, there's all these things about trying to figure out why we die. Well, ask any magnetic monopole, and truly they'll tell you. The monopole controls the whole illusion. I mean, the whole illusion. I have a dream, and I've been watching this dream unfold all the years that I've been involved in this process. The voice told me a lot of strange things, and beginning with neutrinos with mass and so forth and so on. And slowly but surely I've seen, substantiation of these things that I was told in a mystical event, which in and of itself is incredible. But the monopole, in my dream, one of these days down the road, as human design touches more and more lives, it'll touch the right being. You see, I don't think it's actually hard to find it. It's clear to me that nobody's ever known where to look. And it's in our sternum, after all. And somewhere down the road, some biophysicist of some kind or another, because you're going to need to have all of those tools, will figure out some kind of experiment to verify it or not. And it's certainly going to be there in the wave. Sooner or later, and the door, I know that the door is closing on the ability of humanity to be able to resolve such deep principles. But for me, if there is a key to understanding the nature of everything, and I mean everything that exists is rooted in the monopole, holding it together in the illusion of this totality that seems to exist. It is so magical for me that at times It's not often I'm at a loss for words about anything. The monopole is just one of those things that's so incredible. There's a question I've been asked all the years that I've been presenting human design. And it's the gender question. Female, male. Human design doesn't show that. The monopole is the only thing that's responsible. The monopole is responsible for the way in which the quantum works in the illusion. It's all about the monopole. And everything that we think of, everything that we imagine, is our lives. All of this is ruled by this monopole. And the thing that's so interesting in the sense of, the way in which life operates for us is that it is all the monopoles working together that are creating what we call a life. It's them. Them is not the right word. I prefer it. It is raining. The wonderful mysteries of what itism is. This is it. If you want to find an it anywhere, it's the magnetic monopole. It's so incredible. See, I feel better going down below the line and going into the design color and the personality color and looking at those elements absolutely separate from the other, with no relationship to them. And I begin to get this deep, deep taste of what an ordeal it is to pull it together. The deeper you go into understanding the passenger, the further you go in recognizing there is this vast difference between the passenger and its vehicle. And there are barriers between them ever fully grasping their relationship. It's temporary. The personality is within our understanding eternal. Vehicles come and go. They just do. It's this monopole that's doing the work. It's the monopole that is holding together the illusion, and this is the instrument of being. If you want to look out there and you want to say, I can understand the basic premise upon which everything is held together as a life process, there's only one place you need to go. You go to the magnetic monopole. And your aura, which is determined by your monopole, that aura, what you are, the male, the female, the density of the mass, the power of the identity or not, and as you will see, type, obviously, it is all part of what is created by that monopole. And where did it come from? The monopole that's in your sternum. It was in the design crystal that was sitting there in your mother's womb. And how did the personality crystal find it? If we go back to this illustration, it is the monopole in the male that, calls the personality crystal down so that it can get the ride it needs to go to exactly the right place to fertilize the egg. And it's all a monopole game. It's all controlled by the monopole. And think about your personality. Think about it. See, your personality is absolutely, totally overwhelmed by the power of this monopole. Because not only is the monopole creating the illusion that the passenger has to deal with, but the monopole is an ally of the design. It's not an ally of the personality. It's all about the form principle. They came here together. They were together at the very beginning of the whole process. And everything about what we call the evolution of, whether it is life on this planet or the totality as a whole, all of this is a direction established by that monopole. And all of them together. the numbers are mind-boggling. I mean, they're mind-boggling. You look out at nature. You look at the inanimate. I mean, the number of monopoles at work directing all the traffic. It's like to talk about fractals and geometries and all of the things that are part of our language and design. The way profile operates and what I've talked about crystal fractal lines. This is all the monopoles game. I mean, whether you're going to be a 2-5 or a 5-1 or a 3-6 or whatever it's going to be, it's all a monopole game. You got to be brought to the right place at the right time to meet the right crystal. It's all controlled by the monopole. See, this is an incredible illusion. It's so hard to imagine, because I've spent many, many years now going as deep as I can possibly go into the underlying themes of the knowledge. Working from bases to tones to color, and then finally you get above the line and you say, oh my goodness, this is also different. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff down there. And it doesn't. I mean, it really doesn't. You can take advantage of it as knowledge. You can begin to learn things that can have applications that can really be of value to beings. But there's such different worlds. Because there's no illusion down there. None. The only time that you get to an illusion is the moment that you're looking at the body graph. There it is. And it's right in front of you. Over and over again, almost every day of my life now, because those opportunities are there. I keep on reminding people about strategy and authority. And it's necessary to overwhelm the personality. The personality has to surrender to what is its vehicle's life. It has no other choice. It really doesn't. See, it can't win. It has no control. By the way, either does the design. It's like that wonderful illustration of, where am I now? Let's see if I can find it. There it is. That wonderful illustration of the body graph between the two wheels. I mean, this is really the story. It's the host story. And you see, the moment that you're just looking at the wheels, well, you're not looking at anything that's really alive. I mean, it's not. Not in the sense that we understand it. It only becomes alive when it's integrated into that vehicle. Only then. I mean, that's the real joke. The monopole pulls these two things together. And pulls it together and gives it a density. I mean, understand, it gives it a density. That density is what we call our form, our physical body. The way our body looks and the way that it works and the way that it moves and the way that it thinks. Its impact on others, the rules that it has to live by in this life, because it's the monopole that's going to dictate your type. Because it's the monopole that dictates type, not as type, but the way in which auras operate. And we'll talk about that later. It's just an illusion game. See, my goal, if there's any kind of goal intellectually in relationship to design, is to get the mind to grasp the joke and to enjoy the surrender. It's difficult. It's really difficult. And it's difficult because the mind doesn't really have any control. It's very difficult. And yet the only way that you can do that is that, you have to be able to let go and let your vehicle do its thing. I mean, you just do. You have to allow the monopole to do its thing. I mean, if the monopole's creating your density, your fractal line, your geometry, your aura, Everything about you is being held together in that illusion that's moving you along a specific track. What business does the personality have interfering with any of that? It's that joke. You can see it in World by Design, where I was filming this first segment, and all of a sudden the airplanes are going by, and it was wonderful, I mean, if you're sitting on an airplane, you're not about to get up and go to the front and knock the pilot out of the way and fly the plane yourself, because you know damn well it's going to crash. I mean, you wouldn't imagine it. But human beings are crashing their vehicles all the time. And, the personality is so angry and frustrated and bitter and disappointed because it has no control, instead of surrendering to its choicelessness. I mean, if anything, the monopole is here to remind us of something. That this is a game that we do not know how to truly play, because it's not up to us. We're just in it. We're just in it. Passengers. I mean, just passengers. The monopole brought us in, put us in our place, gave us our form, gives us our direction, gives us our life. What is there to do but watch? And then you look out in the world, and you see this unbelievable suffering on the material plane. And I'm not just talking about Hurricane Katrina or the tsunami or the wars. There is an abundance on this planet that is enough to look after even this bloated human species. And yet there is this complete inability for the vast majority of humanity to function in a way with any kind of grace, in that sense, on the material plane. It's very difficult. You see, knowledge, like the knowledge of human design, is for individuals. It's not for the masses. It can't be. It's one person at a time. It's one awareness at a time. It's one potential awakeness at a time. Because it's such a difficult process. We are caught deeply in the illusion. All of us. Me too. I live here. We're all in the Maya. And the Maya is incredibly dense. I mean, incredibly dense. And only when you understand that it's just a construct, it's just something that's held together. And in the moment that you can surrender and you can look at it, just look at it, you'll see it. I mean, you'll see. It just has its own process. People who first come into human design, I hear about design crystals and personality crystals and magnetic monopoles, and they honestly don't pay that much attention to any of that. They're interested in the suffering that they have and the answers that they want, and they want to see what's in that body graph. And I want all of you, because you're here, and so it's your fractal. I want all of you to really be clear about what you're looking at when you're looking at that body graph. And you're just looking at that illusion. Just an illusion. And you can never control it in any way. It's so far beyond your ken, it's unbelievable. It is not something that crystals of consciousness do. It's a monopole job. The illusion is held together by something that neither the personality nor the design has any power to alter in any way. So the only thing to do is surrender. And of course, surrender isn't a choice. It's the other trap. It's not. I keep on harping on everybody to honor their authority and follow their strategy. But it's not a choice. If that's what you resonate to, if that's where your fractal takes you, if that's what's intended to be a part of your illusion, then it will be. And consider yourself amongst the blessed, because truly that's what it is. But there's no choice in all that. And my interest at this point, with this adventure that lies in front of me in terms of education, is to go beneath this illusion in order to reaffirm it. Not to abandon it, but to reaffirm it. To make it so absolutely clear as I can do as a teacher, to make it so clear that this is all illusion, that we have no control, and that there is only one technique, only one, there is no other. There is only one way. It's strategy and it's authority, and there is no other way. It is the way that the monopole permits. Permits. Now I'm going to take you into an area that I think that you're going to find very fascinating. If you take a look at this aura illustration, I want you to think for a moment about a correlation here that's a very important one, and not one that I'm going to explore with you, so one that I want to give you now, so as a kind of tasty treat for you to think about. Think about the G-center. And the G-center is very odd for a number of reasons. The most obvious one is the fact that there are only two crosses in that sense, the two basic crosses of the Sphinx and the Vessel of Love, in which the four arms of those crosses each all operate out of the G-center. And those of you that have, go back to your basic instruction in design, particularly in dealing with the Rave Mandala, know that the 8 gates of the G-center divide the wheel into exactly 8 equal parts, and so forth and so on. So this 8 is something for you to think about, because what you're looking at on the other side is that you're looking at eight variations of aura. And these 8 variations of aura, these are the variations that are created by the magnetic monopole as a byproduct of its process. Remember that, the monopole is attracting in that sense. It's pulling together a specific mass, and it's pulling it together in a certain way that is not only the physical context of your body, but in fact the so-called auric field around your body. And that when you're looking at it, you can see that it breaks down according to type, and that each type represents a binary, and a binary of the way in which the auras of those types operate. So what I want to do with you here is that I'm going to take you through just some overview of this to give you the context, because what I want you to grasp is that type is something that is out of the monopole. Remember that it's the monopole that creates the illusion that we call the body graph. And it creates the context of that illusion. So, when you're looking at aura, you also have to see that there's a manifestor aura and a generator aura and a projector aura and a reflector aura, and they're very, very different from each other. Truly different from each other. Let's begin by looking at the manifestor and the reflector, and I will save the generator and projector for afterwards. And I'm breaking them up in this way, which is unusual, because most of you would, you can see that they're listed according to energy type followed by non-energy type. But it's very important to see in terms of aura context that the basic binaries, or the attractive relationships in terms of specific aura types, are manifestor and reflector, generator and projector. And this simply has to do with the way in which the auras are designed to operate with each other. So let's begin with the manifestor aura. The manifestor aura is a closed aura. Now what a closed aura basically means is that it has a high level of density. And of course, density creates barriers, if you will. And one of the things that's in common between the manifestor and the reflector, you can see that where the manifestor is called closed, the reflector is resistant. Now there is a difference in, the level of density. In other words, the manifestor aura is much more dense, so and when I say dense, It's like a sponge. If you don't put water in the sponge, it's very open. The moment you put water in that, it becomes much more dense in that sense, much more difficult for that to penetrate. The manifestor is a very dense aura, and that gives it its closed quality. When you're looking at the reflector aura is resistant. In other words, it's dense, but it's not as dense as the manifestor aura. Now remember, this is going to be related to how can I describe this? The way in which the monopole, the force it exerts to hold something together. And you can see that with the manifestor aura, it's very tightly held together in that sense. It is not porous. And that you can see that the true binary of the manifestor, just as the true binary of the reflector, is their own similar type. In other words, the generator is the open to the manifestor closed. And you can see right there that this is this basic fundamental polarity between the two. And it is not a polarity that is inherently attractive. It isn't. As a matter of fact, if you could describe the way the manifestor and generator auras actually meet, there's a certain grinding that takes place. But I'll try to describe that better in a few minutes. I want to get back to the relationship of the manifestor to the reflector. So you can see that there are variations in the density of the aura. And this is the most interesting thing to understand about the way in which the monopole has such a deep impact on us. In other words, the way in which it's holding us together is also determining, whether we're going to have a closed aura. And having a closed aura means you are a manifestor, rather than you're a manifestor and you have a closed aura, if you understand what I mean. In other words, if the monopole is creating a dense, closed aura, the byproduct in the body graph is automatically going to be a manifestor. And one of the things about aura sensitivity, because aura sensitivity is something that not everybody has, but for those beings that are aura sensitive, and usually it's those people that have a lot of open centers and non-motor open centers, so that they're much more sensitive to the energy field coming out, is that you can begin to recognize type not by action, because most people assume they're recognizing type in other people by the activity level, the way they operate in that sense, rather than specifically the way in which they feel. That is the quality of that aura. So, when you're meeting a manifestor aura, it's not taking you in. Anybody who knows me personally knows that. And it's not about who you are as a being. It's one of my jokes about what it's like for me to do these lectures with you. It's as warm and fuzzy as I get, and it's so interesting for me. I have a totally different personality when I'm teaching online than when I teach in a classroom. And of course in the classroom it's a very different thing. I'm dealing with physical auras, and I'm dealing with the density of my aura and protecting my aura in that sense. Here in this virtual environment where we don't have aura contact, it's fascinating for me how different suddenly my personality is, because it's not being limited by the closedness of my aura. And I've got a closed aura. When you're on the other side, when you're a reflector, you have this resistance. Now, it's very important to understand that, the reflectors are designed not to be overwhelmed. And I think that's rather obvious. You're dealing with a very special kind of being who comes into the world without any fixedness. So inherent in that is a fundamental protection. I mean, I've talked so often about the fact that, reflectors are not beings that are weak. They're just not. They're not. These are very powerful beings. And they're very powerful beings because they can, without knowing how, they can seem to protect themselves despite the fact that they are so open. And of course, what does this come down to? It comes down to their quality of their aura and the density of their aura. They are resistant, but they're not closed. They're not closed. So it means that they have this ability. If you could see I think you'll see that when I do. It's the third episode of World by Design that I finished filming a couple of weeks ago, and I have all kinds of aura material in that. And it's so interesting to see the way the reflector works. It sort of just rubs up against the other aura, you know? I mean, it just rubs against it. And this is the way that it takes in the outside. It's sort of, it lets it come in very, 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 in a very limited way so as not to be overwhelmed in its openness. And it's a fundamental protection that is there, in the aura. As a matter of fact, if you talk to enough design people, particularly those people that have been to a lot of, like Ibiza events where you have a lot of people and you've got a lot of different types, one of the things you really notice about reflectors is that you immediately feel their aura, and it can be uncomfortable. It is there, it's resistant, it doesn't really let you in, it doesn't really enter, but it's just there. Now you can see that there is a relationship in that sense between the manifestor and the reflector in the way in which their auras will actually meet each other. It's kind of cute. The manifestor aura is deeply dense and closed, but regardless, the reflector aura will rub up against it in that sense. All of this is monopole. It's the monopole controlling the density and the reach and the power of the illusion of the being and the quality of it. I mean, the thing that fascinates me is the generator. I mean, I have a deep, deep love for generators because I see them stripped of all of their frustration and pain. I see them as the agents of life on earth. And when you look at the generator aura and you look at its density, you see that it is very, very porous. I mean, it's very, very porous. A generator aura is a deeply, deeply open aura. As closed as the manifestor aura is, the generator aura is open. Has to be. And when I've had those opportunities to be able to teach, generator for generator courses, one of the things I spend a lot of time talking about is, how every generator with every breath is regenerating the life force. I mean, every generator. It's why it's so important for generators to wake up. When I talk about them mystically as being a builder, most of them see that within a personal context, but it isn't for me. It is, this is, our world deserves to be built by builders rather than slaves, because we don't know who's doing what when it's just slaves. We don't get the world that we deserve or that we belong to. I mean, everything about the life force, everything about the way in which life physically works in our illusion here on the planet is determined by the generator. And so they have this open aura that takes everything in. It takes it all in. It has to. It has to, because if you could see all the generators on the planet, I mean, if we could take a picture now of all the generators on the planet, God knows there's it's about 67, about 2/3, about 4 billion people right now. If you could look at all those 4 billion people and just see them in terms of their aura, you would see that they cover the world. I mean, we all live in the generator aura. We all live in this vast open aura. And in the same way that you can begin to understand the consequences for a manifestor, the manifestor baby that comes out of the womb with a closed aura, and the mother can feel what appears to be or seems to be rejection, when in fact there's no such thing. There's just a closed aura, and you can see the ramifications that come from the very way in which the density operates. And when you think about the generator process, wow! I mean, I know. In my life I'm surrounded by them. I do know. The consequences of this openness, what is taken in. I mean, there's so much taken in. For all the glory that's possible for the generator, an energy type that can, transform its existence in a breath simply by beginning to respond, is to understand the consequence of having such an open aura and the depth of conditioning that fills the body that way. Manifestor in a generator going into a supermarket. The generator leaves the supermarket with its shopping bags and everybody else's stuff. The manifestor just leaves with the bags. Closed aura. You really got to work to get inside a manifestor aura. It's a closed aura. But the generator, and it's not like you can fix that. It's not like you can change it. It's not like you can be open and closed. That's not the binary. And there isn't. It's just open. And then you can see the dilemma inherent and the frustration. The frustration that comes out of not being able to draw the blinds, to all that stuff that is pouring in. But then again, the generator has to be open to take all that stuff to transform it. That's the real thing to grasp. The generator is here to transform the planet. There's nobody else like them. And that very openness is a double-edged sword. Every fucked up generator impacts all kinds of people around them all the time. Because that open aura is taking in all those others. It's not just about what, the poor generator, quote-unquote, takes in. It's also understanding that because of the openness of its aura, it swallows others. It takes them in. There is no greater agent on this planet for conditioning than generators. No greater agent on this planet. As generators live, so do we all. Only when you begin to understand that can you begin to see, if you're a generator, hey, this is really important stuff. And if you know generators, they need to understand this. But for me, the magic still goes back to the monopole. This is a monopole thing. It just is. It's just another mechanism. It's just another instrument. All right, this one's open. Okay, take it all in. Take it all in. And the projector? Now, projectors are truly interesting beings. And when you look at the projector and the way in which its density operates, is that its aura is always focused. Focused. They have a very strange way in which their aura works. If you could see an illustration of a projector aura, what you would see is the aura moving out from its G center to the G center of the other. And that's what the projector aura does as a focused aura. It focuses specifically. And the whole thing about understanding the projector is, if you understand the projector aura as focused, you can then begin to understand something about what we mean when we talk in the illusion about projectors having a gift for recognition. Their gift for recognition is that their aura focuses on the source of self. And that it is not either closed or resistant or open, if you know what I mean. It is simply deeply, deeply focused on the other, whatever that other is, but not in the way of a generator, where the generator is taking in this whole huge field around them. The projector is very, very focused on one specific thing. When I first began to talk about type, it is clear to me that different types are almost like different sexes, in the sense that they're really different. And and they don't and can't necessarily ever really understand each other. It's very difficult. It's very difficult for manifestors and generators truly to operate correctly in an auric combination. It's very difficult. And it usually becomes the burden of the generator, who in its openness, tries to overwhelm the closed manifestor. The same thing is true of the relationship between the projector and the reflector. People think that non-energy types, I remember all these people who had mental projectors with usually the ashen to the throat, talking about how they should be regarded like reflectors because they don't have any inner authority, and it's such nonsense. The moment you understand their aura, you can see that you cannot in any way compare these two. The focused reflector only meets resistance from the reflector. I mean, no matter how focused the projector is, it's only going to meet resistance. You see, the only place where the projector can actually focus is on the generator. And the only way that the generator can be reciprocated in its openness is actually from a projector. Because whenever the generator is dealing with the manifestor or the reflector, it tends to be a one-way process. And of course that often leads to dilemmas within the specific relationships themselves. There is only one real, intended, absolutely significant and necessary relationship on this planet. And it's between the generator and the projector. And as long as I've been in human design, and the more educated the beings in human design around me have become, the more obvious it is that generators and projectors rarely like each other. It's just one of those oddities, and it is something that is a roadblock in the whole process, if you will, of transforming humanity. Projectors are the ones who are on the true ascendancy. That is, the nature of the projector is that this is the era in which the projector could finally reach the potential of its possibilities, and its possibilities of being a guide. And of course you can see that just by grasping the nature of its focused aura, that it has a very powerful capacity to recognize the self of the other. I mean, that is what its aura is all about. And only the generator lets it in. I mean, get that. And the poor generator, I mean, I understand. They're just open. It's not like they're designed just for the projector. It's why they don't get along. They're different. One's an energy type, one's a non-energy type, but the projector is here to focus, and the only one that it can truly focus on is the generator, because that's the way the program wants it. It is this relationship that is the essential relationship. I mean, just look at the numbers. 22% of humanity are projectors. 66% of humanity, are generators. I mean, that's nearly 9 out of every 10 human beings is generator projector. This is the world. And I don't want to get into, discussions about, the contribution of each in that sense. I'm much more interested in outlining for you the dilemmas, if you will. See, the moment that you really grasp the way in which the monopole constructs the aura, this is when, only when, you really begin to understand intertype relationship, and something even more profound. That is, type for type relationship, and how interesting that is. My relationship, for example, with other manifestors. It's so funny when two closed auras meet each other. Not a hell of a lot goes on, I want to tell you. They're closed auras. It's very odd. But think about the serendipity of two generators meeting each other on a desert island. You've got these two open beings, and they can make a very deep contact with each other. Very different. And projector with projector, This is when they're at their glory. They can both focus deeply on the self of the other. You see, type for type is something that is really the way we're moving, but of course it's not going to happen until the genetic imperative dies. Until our fertility program is terminated. Only then are we going to get away from the attraction of difference as the only thing that's stimulating. But from an aura level, you can already see immediately that type for type is something that is just logical, and that the cross relationships between the types, that there are barriers there, and that there are barriers there in most of those connections. They're just there. And it's not like, if you're more aware and you understand it better and blah, 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 and all of this stuff that somehow, you can make it better. It's not about that. You can't. It is what it is. And as we move more and more to what is natural for us and what is correct for us, the underlying awareness that I revealed to you tonight about the nature of the aura, you will see this is the underlying knowledge you need to understand type in the construct of the illusion. It really is. Because when you understand the way the auras work, you understand what the type is. You can see that all of these have a basic binary, and it's not a binary of opposites. It's simply there are two keys that are involved in each description of these aura types. And if we go back to the manifestor that is closed, we can see that there is a descriptive element that's called repelling. Repelling. So, when you're looking at trying to understand the nature of a manifestor, it's something to recognize that their aura actually physically repels. And I don't mean repel in the sense that, you can take it to mean a lot of things. When another aura meets a closed aura, there is a contraction that takes place. There just is. And so it becomes very difficult for manifestors to operate with grace, if you will, in the world of other types. You see this most in manifestor children. They've got closed auras, they've got a repelling aura, and then it's no wonder that they end up being angry in that sense about the nature of being, and they do. When you go to the reflector, you can see that the resistant aura is very different because it doesn't have this density of mass, that what you're dealing with is sampling. In other words, the whole thing about the reflector aura is that as it rubs along the edge, if you will, as it makes that friction connection in meeting the other aura, it samples it. And of course, this is the ultimate gift of the reflector. The role of the reflector is to be the perfect sample of the program. That's what reflectors are here for. They're here to sample the program. And in their aura with others, they're resistant to the conditioning of others, but their sampling of others and their constant sampling of the program is what their aura is all about. It also tells you something else about how much information gets in, doesn't it? In the same way that the openness of the generator leads to a high level of conditioning, the closedness of the manifestor doesn't. But then again, the manifestor doesn't learn how to operate correctly in the society because it doesn't integrate, and so it ends up with its problems in that way. If we look at the relationship between the generator and the projector, if we go to the open generator, we see that its process is envelopment. It is enveloping. If you can see a picture of a generator with a manifestor, you'd see the generator aura going all the way around the closed manifestor aura. But it doesn't mean they get in. It's sort of like surrounding a castle and assuming that you've conquered it. Enveloping is their theme, and the same thing happens to the generator in its relationship with the reflector. The reflector aura is resistant. So the generator can envelop the reflector, but the reflector will only sample the edges of that connection. But with the projector, you can see that the projector is absorbing. So it takes in all that enveloping. It absorbs the generator in that sense completely, but it is absorbing it through its focus. See, we started tonight with, or today, I should say, we all have our different times, started with the magic and the mysticism of the monopole. This incredible thing. And the deeper you go into seeing the source of what is so important to us all in design on the surface, I mean, type and profile and all of this stuff, that the moment that you get to this place and that you see it through the context of the monopole and you see what the auras are, you really can begin to understand how it works. And again, how important it is to surrender. To surrender. Here's this instrument that is your creator in that sense. It holds you together. It creates the illusion. The aura that you have is because of it. There's nothing you can do about any of that. Nothing. It's like the monopole has taken these components from left and right and just pulled them together, and here's the show. Wow. And then what? What do you do? The moment that you see what this is, there's only one place to go. You go back to, all right, my job is just to watch. It's just to watch. This is what I'm here for. There's nothing else to do. It's watching the movie. We don't write the script. We don't control it in any way. This whole illusion about controlling who we are, it's such a joke. It's such a joke. And you can see that. This construct, this quantum that's pulled together, this mystery of life, this is the mystery of life. We're talking about two crystals of consciousness that suddenly are pulled together, and out of that comes this incredible illusion. This illusion with mass that bleeds and cries and eats and dies, all of that stuff. Incredible. And you see, we live in a world of such incredible vanity. This world of shame and blame and all this stuff. And whenever I get to a place where I can look at things this way, I'm just in awe. I hear, I read, I see all these various kinds of spirituality that dominate our planet now, and the fanaticism that is out there, all of these things. All you have to do is look at this graph, and if you can grasp any of what I'm talking about, you're looking at something that is so spiritually beautiful. It is quite incredible. It's just incredible the way it works. One of the real mysteries is how do each of these components operate through the G center? And I'll give you a hint because it's something worth thinking about. The first part, closed, open, focused, resistant, this is Sphinx. And repelling, enveloping, absorbing, and sampling, this is vessel of love. You see, the G center concretizes. It concretizes everything. Now think about something else. If you can think about, just for a moment, these 8 gates in the G center, and think about them as a relationship to these 8 different themes that we're looking at the aura. And now if you think about global cycles, and you think about the lock and key program, which is based on the Sphinx and the vessel, then a big light bulb can go off in your head. And you can begin to understand how the whole mechanic of our evolutionary process is determined by this instrument. It's really amazing. It's just, it's part of the simple beauty. Right now in the world of physics, there are all kinds of people trying to run around and figure out a general field theory in order to be able to understand the nature of being. And I tell you, and I know it is so, that until they understand the monopole the way I understand the monopole, they will never get to this place, because the whole secret of the nature of the universe is right here, right there, in that one singular instrument. To me, that's about as spiritual as I can get. This is an incredible thing. You know, when I wrote that this is the key of being in the advertising, I didn't do that as hyperbole. For me, it's true. That is, if there ever was a key, if Solomon ever had a key, this is where it belongs. This is the key. And in grasping that the monopole is the key, it's the beginning of understanding the whole cosmology, the whole process of the way in which the illusion has come to be. It's interesting stuff. It's one of many themes that I'm going to be delving into when I go through the rave cosmology process. But yeah, I wanted to give you all a chance to just to have that thought, just for a moment, to return to one of these basic elements in design that most people don't reference and don't pay much attention to, and to see that, yeah, they do so at the risk of being ignorant, because truly, to grasp the nature of the monopole is really to begin to understand the basic nature of life itself.